Do you have a suggestion on how to address that particular problem?
Well, I think there's no simple answer to that. So we feel like to sign up to be a pastor today means you're signing up to address this zeitgeist, which is the God of the age is about self. It's about finding yourself in the pages of Scripture rather than God finding you in His story. And so there's about a million different things we have to do. We'll do this in our talk tonight, but we'll show some of the ways that even current art that teenagers can use to decorate their rooms is sort of appeals to this certain moment where we want to believe that we're the very best judge and jury of kind of our own destiny. And so many things, so many messages in our culture, television and movies, and some of the most heroic stories that we all love today, they seem to follow this pattern. You sort of discover who you are by looking really deeply inside. And so it's a countercultural way of living to help show people through Scripture that by trying to find yourself in yourself, it's ultimately a dead end. So to do ministry, you have to constantly combat that sort of spirit of the age.
Yeah, no question about it. And we're kind of living in the I world, right? It's all a bit. It is. Even our brands suggest that we individually are the most important thing going, not the community, not what our decisions, how they affect other people, or how we live or act. And social media is now giving more and more platform to pure individuals who maybe don't have the credibility, the years of study and understanding topics and issues, and they immediately weigh in as pundits on any number of critical issues that you and I would have taken great care to who we're going to let speak into our life, who we're going to trust to help us think about a certain topic. There's obviously benefits to everybody having a voice, and that not only being those who have powerful positions, but the downside to it is the information is now flattened, and it's very difficult for people to decipher and discern what's true, what's not true, who can I rely on, who can I trust. It's driven by a lot of emotion because we've focused so much on the internal to say you can know truth by what you feel and by what your experience is. You don't need to really line it up with a bunch of other experiences. And so our whole culture is dealing with this. This isn't just the church. And I think that's important for pastors to understand. Our neighbors are dealing with these same problems and questions. And that's an opportunity for the church to show up in those moments.
One aspect to think about, we've been beginning to look at sort of the nature of how humor is used in communication. This is a study we'll be looking at over the next number of years, but the early look at this shows that people, what they laugh at is different than it was a decade ago. And so even people who are very earnest, which happens to be the domain of religious communicators, tends to be viewed with skepticism because you must be selling something or you're a televangelist or whatever. And so that's just one example that how media and social media and the nature of YouTube videos and late night television and sort of Comedy Central, if you think about like the media messages that we get as a palette of different colors, and the tweets that you might view, or the Facebook posts or the Instagram messages, and you're constantly bombarded with these images that are painting for you a reality about your leaders, about the nature of truth, about how you should accept others who have differences from you, which is true, but only half true, right? Because it doesn't mean we have to accept everything about their lifestyle, their choices, or their worldview. And so this palette is creating this world around all of us of media and sort of pixels that is very hard to break out of, and it's hard to create a countercultural way of thinking and doing because we're being persuaded with a different kind of rhetorical sort of moment. You're being persuaded by a 3-minute YouTube video that looks really great, and it's a very inspiring or hopeful thing, but it's only maybe half right. And so the church, to try to be match up to this rhetorical moment, I mean, it's not a simple answer. We don't have any easy answers to this, but to at least recognize it allows the church to at least begin to sort of combat that.
What do you suggest to parents in trying to guide their children through this maze as they're growing up?
Well, we're both parents of teenagers, so we're right there. And I think an openness to conversation with them is critical. The same things we would say to a pastor about the humility to listen and learn. I need to do that with my 11-year-old who has questions about God and about faith, and really good questions that challenge me as a parent to say, hey, well, let's go back and look at that together. Let's learn together the humility to say, hey, maybe you did hear me say that, and maybe I shouldn't have said it that way, or I didn't take the time to walk you through how I came to that conclusion. You know, it tends, as parents, we tend to give our kids the conclusion that we've come to, that we've reached from thinking about it, or from our parents or our church, or however we've learned it, without really giving them the process. And I find that children today are a lot more sophisticated maybe than we were. They're really hungry for the why and for the process. And when we take the time to walk them through the process, we actually are honoring them. We're honoring the image of God in them. We're honoring their intellect. We're telling them, look, you can be a Christian and think. This isn't just accept this answer. Let's walk through the conclusion if we take the other path. And that takes time. And I think in a culture today where we're all very fractured for time, there's limited margin, it's putting an onus on parents to say, you better take this seriously. The days of just taking your kids to a Christian school or to church or a Christian college and thinking that's going to help them be disciples ready for the world is not the day we're in. And so parents are going to have to double down on their commitment to steward truly being parents of their children.
And a couple things I've been learning with my teen girls and my 12-year-old boy is that the relationship is the most important thing to keep going. And it doesn't mean I ever sacrifice being a truth teller to them, but I've had to learn to live with more empathy. And you know, like I'm a professional wisdom dispenser, right? Like like I'm constantly, you know, with just these little observations about the research, or these little ideas about ministry, and you know, so I've had to really dial that back and not just say, hey guys, here's exactly how you should think about this, and try to process this with them. And to keep that relationship really, really strong. And like that's like, my kids may make different decisions than I would want them to make, but I want that relationship to remain strong. So as we've processed really tough issues like pornography and eating issues, and you know, like church and all sorts of different things, it's like we actually have to talk about this stuff as a family, and I can't just tell you how to live it. It's something I have to go through with you, and we have to go through this together. So being honest about my own struggles, our own struggles, is also critical in that.
Well, it's a real immaturity, and it's sad because I think we've reached a point culturally where that's being acceptable, to just kind of tribalize, divide off into our corners of the people that fully agree with us. One of the things we point out in this book, in a chapter called 5 Ways to be Faithful, is to try to help Christians understand that the most important filter to put around all this is theology. Like understanding what God's design is for human beings to flourish, and the gospel, and understanding what we believe and what we confess as Christians and what we've always confessed. But when you start to move out, we have 5 different kind of frames, and one of them's politics. But it's pretty far down the line to say, hey, politics is this exercise in trying to find imperfect policies that lead to human flourishing. And great people are going to disagree on the best policies to lead to that. When we move politics up into the theology category and say, hey, we actually, as Christians, have to agree on this specific policy, this proposal, this candidate, we actually really minimize the strength of the church and the breadth of diversity that brings life to our communities. And so I think, you know, stepping back from the emotional edge of this and understanding what really matters, I think we'll regret this year if that's where our relationships go, where our churches go. We need the church to be more unified than ever for the years ahead. And so we need to not fall for this distraction in this moment.